Ethan Brooks grabbed the divorce papers off the kitchen counter and shoved them into the trash for the third time that year. Not because he'd changed his mind, because his 7-year-old daughter kept finding them and asking what they meant. He was done explaining why Daddy slept alone, done pretending everything was fine. But then the woman next door knocked on his door holding 2 movie tickets and a container of homemade popcorn, and said 6 words that broke something open inside him. "You look like you need this." She had no idea what she'd just walked into. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits home, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this goes. The trash can in Ethan Brooks's kitchen had a dent in it, not from use. From his fist, 6 months ago on a Tuesday night in February, when he'd stood alone in that kitchen after putting his daughter to bed, and realized he hadn't spoken to another adult in 4 days. Not a real conversation. Not one that mattered. He'd punched the can instead of the wall because the wall was shared with his daughter's bedroom, and he'd learned early that a father's rage has to go somewhere quiet. That dent was still there. He looked at it every morning when he made Lily's lunch. He looked at it every night when he scraped leftovers off her plate. He'd thought about buying a new trash can maybe 40 or 50 times. But he never did. Some men keep wounds on the outside so they don't have to explain the ones on the inside. Ethan Brooks was 34 years old. He stood 6'1", had hands permanently stained at the knuckles from motor oil. No matter how hard he scrubbed, and he hadn't been on anything resembling a date in 3 years. He owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of Millbrook, Ohio, a town of 11,000 people, where everybody knew your name and half of them knew your business. They knew his business all right. They knew that Dana Brooks had packed 2 suitcases on a Thursday afternoon while Lily was at preschool, left a note on the refrigerator that said, "I can't do this anymore," and driven north toward Columbus to start something she called her real life. That was 4 years ago. Lily had just turned 7. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubbornness, and she still sometimes asked when Mommy was coming back for more than just holidays. Ethan always said the same thing. "Mommy loves you very much, baby," and then he'd go into the garage and sit in the dark for a few minutes before coming back in to finish dinner. He'd built a life, he told himself. A functional one. I had the shop. He had Lily. He had Marcus, his best friend since high school, who came over every other Sunday to watch football and drink beer and not talk about feelings. He had a routine that worked. Get up at 5:30, make breakfast, drop Lily at school, open the shop by 8, pick Lily up at 3, make dinner, help with homework, bedtime, repeat. On the days it felt like a prison sentence, he reminded himself, she's worth it, all of it. On the days it felt like enough, those were harder to trust. He'd stopped trusting quiet good things after Dana left. Good-feeling things had a way of becoming the setup for something worse. So when the moving truck pulled up next door on a bright Saturday morning in April, Ethan barely glanced up from the carburetor he was cleaning in his open garage. New neighbors were new neighbors. He'd nod, be polite, maybe help carry something heavy, and then go back to his business. That was the plan. Tahe. The woman who stepped out of the passenger side of that moving truck was not what he expected, though he couldn't have told you honestly what he'd expected. She was wearing jeans and a yellow t-shirt, her dark brown hair pulled back in a knot that was already coming loose. She was plus size with the kind of presence that some people carry like an apology, and others carry like a flag. She carried it like a flag. She looked at the house, put both hands on her hips, and said loudly to no one in particular, Okay, this is happening, let's go." She clapped her hands twice, like she was coaching herself. The guy driving the truck climbed down, her brother Ethan would later learn, and said, "You sure about this, Soph?" And the woman Sophie apparently turned to her brother and said, "I've never been less sure about anything in my life. Now help me carry that bookshelf." Ethan almost smiled. He didn't, but he almost did. He introduced himself 40 minutes later when her brother tried to back the moving truck into the narrow driveway and came within 6 inches of taking out Ethan's mailbox. Ethan walked out, hands up. Whoa, you're gonna want to cut left. Hard left." The brother, mid-20s, clearly flustered, cut left. More. He cut more. "Now straighten. There you go." The truck settled into the driveway without casualties. The brother climbed out looking relieved. "Thanks, man. I've never driven one of these things." "Yeah, I could tell." Ethan said it without meanness. Just fact. The woman Sophie had appeared from inside the house where she'd been directing the placement of boxes. She leaned against the doorframe and looked at Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. Not flirty, not formal, just direct. "Did you just save my brother from destroying your mailbox? And your truck's rear bumper? He would have blamed me somehow." She walked over and extended her hand. "Sophie Bennett, librarian. Terrible driver, but only of forklifts. Moving trucks I pass off to incompetent little brothers." "Hey," her brother started. "Ethan Brooks," Ethan said, shaking her hand. "Auto shop down the road. And yeah, you probably passed it off to the right person." Sophie grinned. Her brother threw his hands up. It was, Ethan would think later, a perfectly unremarkable introduction. He had absolutely no idea what it was the beginning of. The first month, they were just neighbors. Sophie waved in the morning when he backed out of the driveway. He waved back. Sometimes she left the library late. He could see her car pulling in after 8, and she'd see the lights in his garage still on and raise an eyebrow like she was asking a question without words. He'd shrug. She'd shake her head and go inside. He helped her with the yard exactly once. Her mower quit on her on a Saturday morning, and she knocked on his door a little embarrassed and asked if he had anything she could borrow. He didn't lend her anything. He just mowed her yard while she stood in the driveway drinking iced tea and trying to argue that she could do it herself. "I know you can," he said, pushing past her with the mower. "I'm doing it anyway." She stood there for a moment and then said, "That's either very kind or very condescending, and I genuinely can't tell which." "Which would you prefer?" She thought about it. "Kind. Definitely kind." "Then it's kind." She laughed. And Ethan found himself thinking an hour later, after he'd gone back inside, that he couldn't remember the last time he'd made someone laugh like that. Easy and full. Not polite. Real. He shelved it under harmless and went back to his routine. Lily met Sophie the second week of May. It was an accident. Ethan was backing out of the driveway to take Lily to school when Sophie pulled out of her driveway at the same moment. They both stopped. Ethan rolled down his window. "Morning." "Morning," Sophie said. "Library opens at 8. I always forget the whole world also needs to be somewhere at 8. From the back seat, Lily pressed her face against the window. "Daddy, who is she?" "She's our neighbor bug." "She's pretty." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief, painful second. Sophie, to her eternal credit, did not make a thing of it. She just smiled at the little face in the window and said, "Hi there, I'm Sophie. I work at the library." Lily's eyes went enormous. "The library? That's the one. Do you know where the horse books are?" "Every single one of them." Lily turned to her father with the expression of a person who has just been handed an unexpected gift. Daddy, she knows where the horse books are." Ethan looked at Sophie. Sophie looked at Ethan. Something passed between them that he refused at the time to name. "We're gonna be late, Bug," he said. "Fine," Lily said, sitting back with the resignation of someone 3 times her age. "But we're coming to the library." "Any time," Sophie said. And she meant it. He could tell she meant it. That was the part that unsettled him most. I didn't go to the library that week. Or the next. He told himself it was because he was busy. The shop had 2 engines in and a suspension job that was turning into a nightmare. Lily had a school project on the American Revolution that required approximately 8,000 pipe cleaners and more patience than Ethan had on any given Tuesday. He was busy. That was the reason. It had nothing to do with the fact that Sophie Bennett laughed too easily, said exactly what she thought, and looked at him like she wasn't afraid of whatever she saw. Most people looked at Ethan Brooks like they were waiting for him to be okay. Like okay was the goal, the finish line, the thing they were rooting for on his behalf. Sophie looked at him like okay was the floor, not the ceiling. That made him deeply uncomfortable. I wasn't sure comfortable was actually something he wanted anymore, but he'd gotten used to it. and, used to it, has a gravity all its own. The night everything changed was a Friday in early June. Lily was at his sister's for the weekend, one of those carefully negotiated child-free weekends that Ethan both needed and never quite knew what to do with. He'd spent Saturday cleaning the shop. Sunday he'd reorganized his toolbox, which didn't need reorganizing. Friday night, he was sitting on his porch with a beer going warm in his hand, watching the street go quiet the way it did after 9 in Millbrook, when he heard Sophie's front door open. She came out in jeans and an oversized cardigan, carrying something in her hand. She stopped when she saw him. "Oh," she said. "I didn't know you were out here." "Just sitting." "Okay." She looked at the thing in her hand, and then with the decisiveness of someone who'd clearly had an argument with herself about this. Before stepping outside, she walked across the small stretch of grass between their properties and held it out to him. 2 paper tickets. He looked at them, then up at her. "Drive-in movie," she said. "Tomorrow night. They're doing an old double-feature Rear Window and then the Thomas Crown Affair. I bought 2 tickets because they were cheaper in pairs, and then I realized I don't actually know anyone in this town well enough to ask." Ethan looked at the tickets again. "That's probably a sad thing to admit," she added. "But I'd rather admit it than pretend I have some other reason." He should have said no. Not out of cruelty, out of caution. Out of the particular self-protective logic he'd been running for 4 years. Instead, he heard himself say, "What time?" Sophie blinked. "The movie," he said. "What time does it start?" 7:30. "I'll drive." He held up the beer. "I've only had half of this. I'll be fine by tomorrow." "I wasn't going to ask you to drive." "I know, I'm offering." She studied him for a moment with that look he still couldn't fully read. Then she nodded. "Okay. Okay." She took one of the tickets back, handed him the other. Their fingers didn't touch. But he was aware with a precision that surprised him of how close they came. 7, she said. "In case you want to eat first." "Sure." She went back inside. He sat back in his porch chair, looked at the ticket in his hand and thought, "This is nothing. This is just a movie." He believed it completely. He believed it right up until the moment he didn't. He almost canceled twice. Saturday morning he woke up and thought, "She's a neighbor. This is a bad idea." He got as far as picking up his phone, looking up her number. He had it from when she'd moved in, emergency contact stuff, and then he put the phone down and made coffee instead. Saturday afternoon, he thought, "What am I doing? I'm not in a place for this." He said it out loud to no one standing in his own kitchen. He looked at the dented trash can. He didn't cancel. He took a shower. He put on a clean flannel over a decent t-shirt. He knocked on Sophie's door at 7 o'clock, exactly as he'd said. She answered in a blue dress and a light jacket, her hair down for the first time he'd seen, and she was holding a large container of homemade popcorn. He stared at the popcorn. "You made popcorn." "Drive-in popcorn is a crime against humanity," she said. "I made kettle corn and regular, and there's also some with this jalapeno seasoning. I maybe put too much of—" "Sophie." She stopped. "You made 3 kinds of popcorn for a drive-in movie." She looked at the container. "Yes. I've been to restaurants that put in less effort." She seemed to decide something. "You're going to want the jalapeno kind, trust me." She locked her door. She walked to his truck. She got in like she'd done it 1,000 times, settled the popcorn between them on the bench seat and said, "Okay, I'm ready." Ethan stood outside the truck door for 1 extra second. "This is just a movie." He got in. He started the engine. He drove toward whatever came next. The Millbrook Drive-In had been there since 1957. It had survived multiplex theaters' video rentals, streaming a parking lot fire in 2009 that took out 11 cars and a dispute with the county over its sign. It sat on 12 acres on the east edge of town, the screen visible from the highway if you were going fast enough to catch it in your peripheral vision. Ethan had been there exactly once with Dana early in their marriage before things got complicated. He hadn't thought about that night in years. He thought about it for exactly the length of time it took to pull into the lot, and then he let it go. Or he tried. Sophie rolled her window down, and let the summer air in the specific kind of Ohio summer air that's warm, but not heavy, yet the kind that smells like cut grass and possibility. She held her arm out into the wind like a kid. I haven't been to a drive-in since I was 9, she said. Where'd you grow up? Cleveland. You? Here. Millbrook, born and raised. He found a spot toward the middle, angled the truck, killed the engine. Never left. Is that a good thing? He thought about it honestly, which he realized he hadn't done in a long time. Some days, yes. Some days it's just the only thing I know how to do. Sophie turned to look at him. Not with pity, with attention. There's a difference between staying and being stuck, she said. I know. Do you? He met her eyes. That was the first time he felt it, not attraction exactly, or not only that. Something more like recognition. Like a door he'd boarded up from the inside and almost forgotten about had just registered a knock. He looked away first. You want to start with the jalapeno or the regular? He asked. She let him change the subject. Jalapeno. Good call. Rear Window started. Neither of them paid much attention to it. Not because they were flirting, they weren't. Not exactly, not yet. It was something quieter than that. It was two people who had each gotten very good at being alone, discovering in real time that the other person made silence feel different, less like a wall, more like a room. Around the second reel. Sophie pulled her jacket tighter and said without particularly directing it at him, I had a job interview for a university library position in Ann Arbor last spring. Full benefits, better pay, big research collection. Everything I'd been working toward for 4 years. Ethan didn't say anything. He was listening. I turned it down, she said. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Because the day before the interview, my mother called and told me she'd been diagnosed with early Parkinson's. And my brother, the one with the moving truck, he's got a new baby and a mortgage. So. She shrugged with one shoulder. I took the Millbrook job instead, closer to home. I'm sorry about your mother. She's managing okay right now, but... Sophie stared at the screen without seeing it. I used to think my life was building toward something. Every choice was a step. And then you make a choice that doesn't fit the pattern, and you realize the pattern was the story you told yourself, not actually the plan. Ethan processed that. What's the difference? He asked. Sophie turned to look at him. A story you can rewrite, she said. A plan, when it breaks, it just breaks. He sat with that for a long time. On the screen, Jimmy Stewart peered through binoculars at a courtyard full of people who didn't know they were being watched. I thought I had a plan, Ethan said finally. The whole thing. Business, family, grow old in the same town I grew up in. I had it laid out. What happened to it? Dana happened. He said the name neutrally, the way you say the name of a scar, not with bitterness, just acknowledgement. My wife, ex-wife. She left 4 years ago. Said she couldn't breathe here. Said she loved me, but wasn't in love with me anymore. Said she needed something I wasn't. He stopped. I don't know. Something. Do you know what it was? The something. No. He thought about it again. Actually thought about it for maybe the first time without the pain clouding everything. Maybe I never asked her the right questions. Maybe she never asked me. We just stopped talking about the real stuff and told ourselves the quiet was peaceful. Sophie nodded slowly. The quiet isn't always peaceful. No, he agreed. Sometimes it's just everyone pretending. The first movie ended. The lot filled with the sound of crickets and car engines being adjusted for comfort. Sophie held out the regular popcorn without looking at him. He took a handful. It was such a small thing. It wrecked him completely, how easy it was. Between the films, there was a 20-minute intermission. People got out of cars. Kids chased each other. A teenager in a Jeep played music too loud for 30 seconds before someone nearby honked. Sophie got out to stretch. Ethan followed. They stood beside the truck, looking at the screen blank, now just white lit against the dark, and Ethan leaned against the truck bed and folded his arms and looked at her sideways. Can I ask you something? You can try, she said. Why'd you buy 2 tickets? She raised an eyebrow. I told you, they were cheaper in pairs. You could have brought your brother. My brother, she said flatly, would have talked through both movies and eaten all the popcorn. You could have gone alone. She was quiet for a moment. The breeze moved through the field. Somewhere across the lot, a kid was laughing. I could have, she said finally. But I've been going places alone for a long time, Ethan. Restaurants, movies, concerts. I got good at it. I made it a thing I was proud of. Sophie doesn't need anyone. Sophie handles it herself, and I am proud of it. She paused. But there's a difference between choosing to be alone and just defaulting to it because you've told yourself no one would want to come. He looked at her. I looked at you out there on your porch, she said, not quite looking back, and I thought that man hasn't done something for himself in a long time. Not really, and neither have I. She finally met his eyes. So I figured maybe 2 people who both needed a night off could split the cost of it. Ethan was quiet. That's the actual reason, she said. If you want it. He did. He wanted it more than he'd wanted most things in recent memory. Thank you, he said, for the tickets. Thank you for driving. You should know, he said, that I'm not in a place where He started over. I haven't done this, any version of this, in years. She looked at him steadily. Neither have I. I don't know what I'm doing. Same. That doesn't bother you. She considered it seriously. A little, she said. But I'm more bothered by the alternative, which is sitting in my house watching something I've already seen, eating cereal for dinner, and telling myself it's fine. Something in his chest moved, not fell, not broke. Moved the way something moves when it's been still too long. Sophie. The second movie's about to start, she said, nodding at the screen where the countdown had appeared. We should get back in. Yeah, they got back in. He didn't close the distance between them. That wasn't what this night was. But when the second film started, and the truck cab filled with blue-silver light, and Sophie shifted slightly in her seat, and the popcorn was long gone, and she was close enough that he could hear her breathe. He didn't move away either. It was after 11 when he pulled back onto her street. The town was asleep. The houses were dark. He cut the engine in his driveway, and they sat for a minute without any particular reason to sit there, just the 2 of them in the quiet cab of a truck that smelled like jalapeno popcorn and whatever her shampoo was. That was a good movie, Sophie said finally. Both of them. I didn't watch most of the first one. Me neither. She smiled, not at him at the dashboard like the smile was private first. Thank you, she said, for saying yes. You gave me 30 seconds to back out and I didn't. I know. She paused. I was kind of terrified you would. He looked at her. In the dark cab with the streetlight coming through the windshield, she looked not perfect. Real. Present. Unguarded in a way that his gut told him she rarely let herself be. I thought about it, he admitted. Canceling. I know that too. How? Because you're a man who's gotten very good at talking himself out of things, she said simply. I recognize it because I do the same thing. He didn't argue. You're going to be in my head now, he said. It came out before he'd decided to say it. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she picked up the empty popcorn container, opened her door, and stepped out. She leaned down, one hand on the door. Ethan, she said. Yeah. Good. She closed the door. She walked across the grass to her porch, unlocked her door, and went inside. He sat in his truck for a long time. The light in her front window came on. He sat there until it went off. Then he went inside his own house, stood in his kitchen, looked at the dented trash can, and understood somewhere below the level of words that something had shifted. Not fixed. Not solved. Not finished. Just different. For the first time in 4 years, different felt like a direction. I didn't know yet where it pointed. But he stopped for one night, being afraid to find out. To be continued in part 2, 2 people learning to be seen. From wherever you're watching tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. If it found you where you needed it, subscribe and stay with us. This is just the beginning. He didn't sleep well that night. Not because anything bad happened. That was almost the problem. Nothing bad happened, and Ethan Brooks had spent 4 years bracing for bad things. The way a man braces for a punch he knows is coming. Shoulders up, jaw tight, already calculating the damage before it lands. When the punch doesn't come, the body doesn't know what to do with itself. It just stays tense. Waiting. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about a woman who made 3 kinds of popcorn for a drive-in movie and looked at him like she already knew the answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. He thought about what she'd said. "You're not afraid of loving again, Ethan. You're afraid of believing you deserve it." She hadn't said that. Not yet. But he felt like she'd almost said it. Like the words were in the room with them, and neither of them had the nerve to speak them out loud. He rolled over at 1:30 in the morning and picked up his phone. No messages. He put it back down. He fell asleep sometime around 3. At 5:30, the alarm went off. He got up. He made coffee. He looked at the dented trash can and felt something new sitting in his chest, alongside the old familiar weight, not lighter exactly, but different in texture. Less like concrete, more like clay. Something you could maybe work with. He didn't let himself think about it too hard. That was the trick. You didn't examine the feeling directly. You just let it exist in your peripheral vision and went about your morning. He dropped Lily at school. He opened the shop. He put his hands under the hood of a 2011 Ford F-150 with a cracked head gasket, and he worked. He worked. The way he always worked when something was chasing him. Focused, methodical, speaking to no one, unless spoken to. His one employee, a 22-year-old kid named Danny, who had more natural instinct for engines than anyone Ethan had ever trained, knew enough to give him space on mornings like this. Danny just cranked the radio and handed tools when asked, and didn't press. Good kid. Ethan appreciated that more than he ever said out loud. Around 10:30, his phone buzzed. He almost let it go. He was elbow deep in someone's engine block, and his hands were filthy, and he had grease on his forearm up past the elbow. But something made him pause. He stripped off his right glove and checked. It was Sophie. The text read, "I found the horse books. There are 11 of them. Your daughter has excellent taste." He read it twice. He stood there in the middle of the shop. Engine parts spread around him, the radio playing something country and mid-tempo, and he felt the corner of his mouth pull up before he could stop it. He typed back with one clean finger. "She's going to need a list." Sophie responded in under a minute. Already made one. Alphabetical by horse name. He stared at that. Then he typed, "You alphabetized it by horse name." Obviously. That's insane. That's called thoroughness. We do things properly at this library. He set the phone down. How was smiling? Actually smiling, the real kind, the kind that starts before you decide to and ends after you try to stop it. He picked up his glove. He went back to work. Danny walked past, glanced at him, and said absolutely nothing, which was exactly right. That afternoon, Lily's school called. Not for an emergency. He felt his heart slam against his ribs anyway, when the front office number came up the way it always did, the way it would probably always do for the rest of his life. But it was just Mrs. Patterson calling to remind parents about the end-of-year field trip permission slip. Ethan confirmed, hung up, sat for a moment with his hand on the phone, even after the call ended. Being a single parent meant your nervous system never fully stood down. It meant you were always on alert for the next thing, the next call, the next moment something went sideways. You couldn't afford not to be. He thought about what Sophia said. About defaulting to a loan because you'd told yourself no one would want to come. I thought about how many times he'd chosen the thing that felt safe over the thing that felt good because safe had never cost him the way good did when it went wrong. Then he got back under the truck. He didn't cancel their plans. They didn't have any formal plans, they hadn't made any. But something in him knew that not seeing her that evening would feel like a choice, and not the kind he could pretend he hadn't made. He closed the shop at 5. He picked up Lily. In the car on the way home, Lily said without looking up from her drawing. She was always drawing horses, mostly sometimes dogs, occasionally what she called battle hamsters, which Ethan had never asked her to explain. Is the library lady nice? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Who told you about the library lady? You did, when you were on the phone and I was in the hall. She said it the matter-of-fact way only children can. No apology for listening. Pure information. You were eavesdropping. I was walking. Sound happened. He pressed his lips together. She's nice, yes. Does she know about the battle hamsters? I haven't covered that yet. You should. It's a good test. Lily went back to her drawing. If she thinks it's funny, she's probably okay. Ethan said nothing to that for a long moment. When'd you get so smart? He finally asked. I was always smart, Lily said. You just weren't paying attention. I got home at 5:40. He made dinner pasta, simple, quick, Lily's favorite, as long as he put enough cheese on it. They ate. He helped her with her homework, long division, which Lily treated as a personal insult from the universe. They had the same argument about showing her work that they had every time. She showed her work. He checked it. She was irritatingly almost never wrong. He put her to bed at 8:30. He read half a chapter of her current book, a story about a girl who trained wild horses in Montana, and by the time he finished, she was already sliding toward sleep, her breathing slowing, her grip on the stuffed rabbit she still kept but wouldn't admit to loosening. He turned off the light. He stood in the hallway for a moment, just standing. Then he went to his kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water, not a beer, just water. He stood at the counter and thought about the fact that Sophie's kitchen light was on. He could see it through the window above his sink, a warm square of yellow in the otherwise dark house next door. He thought, I could text her. He thought, don't push it. He thought, she made 3 kinds of popcorn, Ethan. He picked up his phone. He stared at it. He put it down. He picked it up again. He typed, she wants to know if you think battle hamsters are funny. He sent it before he could think about it too hard. He put the phone face down on the counter and poured the rest of his water out just to have something to do with his hands. The phone buzzed. He flipped it over. I need more context, but I'm already leaning yes. What's a battle hamster? He smiled. Typed, my daughter's invention. Hamsters trained for combat. Don't ask about the lore, it goes deep. Oh, she and I are going to get along just fine. He leaned against the counter. He breathed. He typed, she says you knowing the horse books is a good sign. There was a pause, longer than the others. He felt the pause like a physical thing, like a held breath. Then, she sounds like a kid who knows what matters. He stood there in his kitchen at 9:15 on a Sunday night holding his phone, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain to himself, he felt his eyes sting. Not grief, not sadness. Something older and more complicated. The feeling of wanting something you've convinced yourself you don't deserve, and then having someone come along and quietly refuse to agree with that story. He put the phone down. He went to bed. He slept better than he had in months. That was the beginning of the second week. The second week was where everything got harder, not because anything went wrong between him and Sophie. It was almost more complicated than that. Nothing went wrong, which meant he had no excuse to step back. And stepping back was the thing he was best at, and not having an excuse for it was deeply uncomfortable. Monday, she brought Lily 3 books from the library. Just dropped them on his porch in a bag with a note in Sophie's handwriting that listed exactly which horse appeared on which page, and why that horse specifically was going to appeal to a kid who liked strong-willed females, which was how Sophie had described Lily without ever having spent more than 4 minutes with her. Ethan read that note 3 times. Then he put it in the junk drawer and tried to forget it was there. He couldn't forget it was there. Lily opened the bag and made a sound like she'd found buried treasure. Daddy, she said. I see it. She sent notes. I see that too. Lily pressed the note to her chest dramatically. I love her. Lily. I'm just saying. You've met her for 4 minutes. And I love her. Lily said firmly, the way 7-year-olds say things that are inconveniently true. Some people you just know. Ethan looked at the bag of books. He looked at the junk drawer. He thought about the note inside it. He thought about Sophie sitting in her kitchen the night before, texting him back in under 30 seconds every single time, and the quality of those pauses that weren't quite pauses. "Go read," he said. Lily went. He stood in the kitchen alone for a minute and had a serious conversation with himself about the difference between gratitude and feelings, and about how they did not have to be the same thing, and about how this was still new, and he was not a man who rushed things. He believed exactly half of that. Tuesday he went to the library. He told himself it was to return some books Lily had finished from her previous batch, which was true. But Lily had finished them Sunday, and he could have returned them any time. He chose Tuesday afternoon, slow day at the shop. Danny could hold things down. It was a perfectly logical time to run an errand. He stood outside the library for 30 seconds before going in. Sophie was at the front desk, helping a man in his 70s figure out the online catalog system. She was patient and clear, and she spoke to him the way you speak to someone who matters, not the way you speak to someone who's slowing you down. The old man kept apologizing for not understanding, and she kept saying, "No, this system is genuinely confusing. It's not you. Let me show you again." Ethan stood near the door and watched this for a moment. I didn't mean to watch. He just saw it. And something about it settled something in him. The way she was with people. The absence of performance in her kindness. She wasn't kind because she was observed. She was just kind. She looked up. Saw him. She didn't wave dramatically or make a show of it. She just smiled, quick reel contained, and held up one finger. "Give me a minute." He browsed the new releases. He looked at nothing in particular. She appeared beside him 3 minutes later. "You actually came." "I said I'd return these." He held up the books. "You could have put them in the return slot outside." "I could have." She looked at him. He looked at the book in his hand. It was a thriller he had absolutely no interest in. He put it back. "You want to see where the horse section is?" she asked. "I know where the horse section is." "Do you?" He didn't. He'd never had cause to find it before. "Fine," he said. "Sure." She led him to the back corner of the library. Children's section. Warm lighting, short shelves at kid height, and an entire row of horse books organized in a system that only Sophie could have devised. She explained it to him. He listened less to the words and more to the way she talked when she was in her element, faster, lighter, her hands coming up to gesture without self-consciousness. This was where she was comfortable. This was who she was when she wasn't thinking about who she was. He filed that away. "You really love this job," he said. She paused. "I really love books. The job is it's good. It's not Ann Arbor, but it's good." "Do you think about that, Ann Arbor?" She was quiet for a beat. "Sometimes. Mostly I think I made the right call. Occasionally on bad days I think I made the call I was supposed to make, and those are different things." "And today?" She looked at him sideways. "Today feels like a right call day." They stood between the shelves for a moment. A kid ran past them chasing another kid. A librarian shushed them without conviction. The soft sounds of a public building in the afternoon settled around them, keyboards, pages, the distant ping of the elevator. "I should let you get back to work," Ethan said. "Probably." Neither of them moved for another 2 seconds. "Same time next week," she said, lightly, carefully, not quite a question. "For returning books. For whatever reason makes sense." He nodded once. He walked out. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for a moment, both hands on the wheel, and told himself he was completely in control of this situation. He was not even remotely in control of this situation. That was Thursday of the second week, and by Friday, Marcus showed up. Marcus Webb had been Ethan's best friend since 9th grade. He was 40 and looked at broad-shouldered, always wearing some combination of sports jersey and work pants. And he had the particular talent of saying exactly what he thought about 3 seconds before you were ready to hear it. He appeared at the shop on Friday afternoon with 2 sandwiches from the deli. Down the road, dropped one on Ethan's workbench, and sat on the stool in the corner that he had claimed as his own, roughly 15 years ago. "So," Marcus said. "Don't," Ethan said. "I haven't said anything. You have the face." What face? The face you make when you think you know something. Marcus picked up his sandwich. I heard from Linda Patterson that you went to the drive-in Saturday. Linda Patterson needs to retire and focus on her garden. She also heard that you were not alone at said drive-in. Ethan picked up a wrench he didn't need and turned it over in his hand. I went with a neighbor. Sophie Bennett, librarian. You got her name from Linda Patterson in under a week. This is Millbrook, Marcus said, as if that explained everything. It did. Ethan set the wrench down. We went to a movie. It was 2 people going to a movie. Okay. That's it. All right. Don't give me that. I'm not giving you anything. Marcus spread his hands. I'm eating my sandwich. You're the one explaining a movie to a man who didn't ask. Ethan picked up the wrench again. Marcus ate his sandwich. After a long silence, Ethan said, She's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, not her. In a good way or a bad way? He thought about it. In a way that makes me feel like I've been standing in a room with the lights off for a long time, and someone just reached over and turned on a lamp. Marcus was very still for a second. Then he said slowly, Ethan James Brooks. Don't. Brother, that is the most feeling I have heard you describe in maybe 4 years. I know. That's not nothing. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Ethan looked at the wrench in his hand. He set it down very deliberately. I'm going to go slow. I'm going to not make it a bigger thing than it is. I'm going to remember that I have a kid and a business, and I am not in a position to what? Marcus said. To feel something. To let someone in. To maybe, I don't know, try again. It's not that simple. I know it's not simple. Marcus's voice shifted. Softer now. I also know you've been using that as an excuse for about 3.5 years past the point it made sense. He paused. Dana leaving messed you up. I was there, I watched it. But Ethan, you have been punishing yourself for something that wasn't entirely your fault. And this woman next door, this Sophie, sounds like maybe she sees that. Ethan said nothing. Marcus picked up his sandwich and finished it in 2 bites. I'm not telling you to marry her. I'm telling you to stop treating the possibility of something good like it's a threat. He stood up. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Also, he added, already heading for the door, I want to meet her. Linda said she made homemade popcorn, and I feel like we'd get along. He left. Ethan stood in the shop alone. The afternoon sun came through the high windows and made long rectangles on the concrete floor, and he stood in one of them and thought about what Marcus said. Not about the popcorn. About the lights in a room. About the punishing. About whether he'd been making a virtue out of a wound for so long he'd forgotten the wound was the problem and not just the shape of his life. His phone buzzed. Sophie. Your daughter's second favorite horse book is overdue. I'm waiving the fine. This one time. He typed back. She's manipulating you. I know. It's working. She's got a gift. Don't tell her that. Too late, I may have told her when she came in today. He stopped. She came in today? She had school. It's 3:40, school's out. She told Mrs. Kowalski you'd pick her up there. Should I be telling you this? He grabbed his keys. He was already moving toward the door before the next text came. She's fine. She's reading. I gave her milk and those little crackers. But maybe give me your number as an actual emergency contact, because I apparently already am one. He pulled up to the library in 8 minutes. He walked in, went straight to the children's section, and found Lily in the beanbag chair in the corner, the oversized purple one with a book open on her lap, a half-eaten pack of crackers beside her, and Sophie sitting cross-legged on the floor next to her, also reading. They both looked up when he appeared. Lily said, I'm almost at the good part. Sophie said, perfectly calm. She has about 4 more pages. She can finish. Ethan stood there with his keys in his hand and his heart still going faster than it should have been. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the woman sitting on the floor beside her, casual as anything like this was a thing she did every day. Like Lily was simply someone worth sitting next to. He felt something shift in his chest again. Not the same shift as before. Deeper. The kind of shift that doesn't shift back. 4 pages, he said. 4 pages. Lily confirmed, already looking back at the book. Ethan sat down in the chair across from them. He didn't have anything to do. He just sat. He waited. He watched Sophie read. She was actually reading, not pretending, genuinely absorbed in whatever she'd pulled off the shelf. And he thought about how she'd said she spent a lot of years going places alone and making a thing to be proud of out of it. He understood that more than he could have articulated. He also thought about how this right here, this ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in the children's section of the Millbrook Public Library, felt more like a real life than anything had in a long time. Lily finished her 4 pages. She closed the book with the satisfaction of a person who has arrived at an entirely expected destination and is still pleased by it. "Good ending?" Ethan asked. "Perfect ending," Lily said. She looked at Sophie. "Same time Thursday." Sophie looked at Ethan briefly, then back at Lily. "Same time Thursday," she said. Lily got up, handed Ethan her backpack, and walked toward the door like she'd made all the important decisions, and the adults could handle the logistics. Ethan stood up. He looked down at Sophie, who was still on the floor, now looking up at him with an expression he was starting to learn, the one where she was saying something without saying it. "Thank you," he said, "for watching her." "She watched herself," Sophie said. "I just happened to be in the same room." He offered her his hand. She took it and let him help her up off the floor. They were close when she stood, not inappropriate, just close. Close enough for him to register it. He stepped back. She let go of his hand. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday," she agreed. He caught up with Lily at the door. She took his hand without looking at him, still thinking about her book probably, and they walked out into the late afternoon. He was quiet the whole drive home. Lily was quiet too, which for Lily was significant. At the second stoplight, she said without preamble, "She looks at you different than other people." Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "What do you mean? Like she's not waiting for you to be something. She just looks at what's already there." Lily considered this. "It's nice." The light changed. He drove. He didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that wouldn't have been either too much or not enough. But he thought about it the rest of the evening. He thought about it while making dinner. Lily's turn to pick. She chose tacos, he made them, and while helping with the spelling test, she had Monday, and while sitting on the couch after she was in bed with the television on to something he wasn't watching. He thought about it until 9:45 when Sophie texted, "She's good, Ethan. Really genuinely good. You did that." He stared at the message for a long time. He typed, "We did what we had to. Sophie." "That's not what I said. I said you did that. Take the credit." He put the phone down. He sat there in the dark with the TV going, and something that felt very much like the beginning of trust, reforming in a place where it had been broken so long, he'd almost stopped knowing it could come back. It was a slow, cautious, not entirely comfortable feeling. It was the best feeling he'd had in 4 years. 3 weeks after the drive-in, Ethan did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He made a reservation. Not at anywhere fancy. Just Caruso's, the Italian place on 5th, that had red checkered tablecloths and bread they brought out without asking, and a wine list that was exactly 2 pages long. He'd taken Dana there once early on before things got quiet in the bad way. He hadn't been back since. He made the reservation for 2 for Saturday at 7, and then he stood holding his phone in the shop parking lot at 5 in the afternoon, wondering how exactly to ask a woman to dinner when you had genuinely forgotten the mechanics of the thing. He typed 6 different versions of the message. He deleted all 6. He called Marcus. Marcus picked up on the second ring. "If you're calling to talk yourself out of asking her to dinner, I'm hanging up. I need to know how to word it. Ethan, you rebuild engines. You are not afraid of a text message. Those are different things entirely. Type the words, send them, stop engineering it." He hung up on Marcus. He typed, "I have a reservation at Caruso's Saturday at 7. I'd like it if you came with me. That's a dinner invitation in case I'm being unclear." He read it once. He sent it. He stared at his phone for 47 seconds. "Sophie." You absolute dork. Yes. He exhaled so hard, Danny looked over from the other side of the lot. You okay, boss? Fine, Ethan said. I'm completely fine. He was completely fine, and also felt like he might need to sit down. Saturday came with the particular cruelty of a day that moves too slow until it moves too fast. He dropped Lily at his sister Karen's. Karen, who raised both eyebrows when she saw him in a button-down that wasn't flannel and said nothing out loud because she was a decent person but said everything with her face. He drove home. He stood in front of his closet for 7 minutes. He put on the gray shirt, decided that was wrong. Put on the navy one, decided that was better, and was still second-guessing it when he knocked on Sophie's door at 6:50. She opened the door in a deep burgundy dress, her hair down a pair of small gold earrings, and she looked at him and said, You're wearing the navy shirt. Good call. He blinked. How did you know I had options? Because you look like a man who spent 20 minutes at his closet. 7 minutes. That's almost worse. She stepped out and pulled her door shut. You look nice, Ethan. He looked at her. Something about the directness of the way she said it. Not performative, not coy, just honest landed in the center of his chest and stayed there. You look, yeah, he said, which was not a complete sentence, but was apparently the best he had. She smiled. Thank you. They drove to Caruso's. The hostess sat them at a corner table, which was either luck or the universe deciding to cooperate for once. They got the bread. They ordered the wine Sophie chose because she said she'd grown up with a father who treated every restaurant wine list like a minor emergency, and she'd developed strong opinions in self-defense. She was right about the wine, he told her so. Tell me something you've never told anyone else, she said after the first glass. It was such a direct question that he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one caught off guard. You just lead with that. We've been dancing around the edges of each other for 3 weeks. I'm tired of the edges. He put his glass down. He thought about it seriously because she deserved the serious version. Okay, he said. When Dana left the day she left before I knew anything was wrong, I spent the afternoon fixing a neighbor's truck for free, just because the guy was struggling and I wanted to feel useful. When I came home, the note was on the refrigerator. He paused. For a long time I thought if I'd come home earlier, I could have stopped her. Talked her out of it. Fixed it. And then eventually I realized I couldn't have stopped her, because she'd already been gone for a year. I just hadn't known to look. Sophie was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that holds something carefully. That's not a failure, she said. I know that now. Took me a while. How long? About 3 weeks ago, he said. She understood exactly what he meant. He could tell by the way she didn't fill the space after it. Your turn, he said. She turned the wine glass in her hands. I was engaged, she said. His name was Ryan. We were together 4 years, engaged for 6 months. He was handsome and smart and funny, and he never once in 4.5 years introduced me to his coworkers as his girlfriend. Ethan went very still. He said I was private. He said he was protective. He said a lot of things. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness was the kind you build deliberately, brick by brick. The night of his office Christmas party, I overheard him tell someone I was just a friend who needed a ride home. I left. He called 11 times before midnight. She looked up. I didn't answer. Good, Ethan said. I know. He didn't deserve to be answered. I know that now too. She set the glass down. What I'm still working on is not walking into every room waiting for whoever's beside me to do the same thing. He looked at her directly. I am not going to do that. I know you think that. Sophie, look at me. She did. I know I can't prove it. I know words don't prove anything. But hear me say it clearly, I am not ashamed of you. I will not be ashamed of you. Not in front of my friends, not in front of my family, not in a room full of strangers. That is not something you have to earn with me. She looked at him for a long moment. Her jaw tightened slightly the way jaws do when you're holding something that wants to move. That, she said finally, is either the most genuine thing anyone has ever said to me in this context, or you're the best liar I've ever met. I'm a terrible liar. My daughter figured it out when she was 4. She laughed. That real laugh, the easy full one. He felt it like something unclenching. Dinner came. They talked. Not about wounds anymore, about other things. He found out she'd been to 17 countries on a budget that made his mechanic's logic tighten with anxiety on her behalf. She found out he'd never left Ohio except once, for a buddy's bachelor party in Nashville, that he described as 3 days of decisions I fully stand behind and will never repeat. She told him about the time she accidentally shelved an entire mystery collection in the wrong order and caused 3 seniors to file formal complaints. He told her about the time he fixed a car so thoroughly, the owner called him a month later, furious because it had broken down again, and it turned out to be a completely different car the owner had just assumed Ethan had also fixed. They laughed more than he'd laughed in one sitting in years. When the check came, he took it before she could reach for it. She opened her mouth. He said, "Let me." Not bossy, just clear. She let him. Outside Caruso's, standing on the sidewalk under the streetlight, she looked up at him and said, "This was a first date." "Yes. I want to acknowledge that out loud, because I think we both had ideas about what this was and what it wasn't, and I'd rather be honest about it." "Agreed. So," she said, "how'd we do?" He looked at her. The night was warm, the town was quiet, and Sophie Bennett was looking at him, in that way she had the way, that saw the thing he actually was, not the reduced version he offered to the world when he was being careful. "I think," he said, "we did real well." She nodded once like she was filing that away. He drove her home. He walked her to her door, not because she needed the gesture, but because he wanted to make it. She unlocked the door and turned back to him on the step and was slightly taller with the step between them. "Same time next week," she said. "Earlier," he said. 6. "I want more time." Something lit up in her expression, and then went carefully neutral in a way that he understood, because he understood people who'd learned to manage their own hope before it could be used against them. She nodded. 6. "Good night, Sophie." "Good night, Ethan." I went home. He sat on his porch for a while in the dark, and felt for the first time in a long time like a man who was moving towards something instead of away from it. It was strange. It was uncomfortable in the specific way of shoes that fit right, but haven't been broken in yet. He went to bed. He slept well. He didn't know that was the last uncomplicated night for a while. 3 days later on a Tuesday, Dana called. Not a text. A call. At 8:14 in the evening, while Ethan was washing dishes, and Lily was in the bath. He looked at the screen for 3 full rings. Dana Brooks, still her contact name. He'd never changed it, never thought about it either way. He answered. "Hey," she said. Her voice was the same. That was the first thing that hit him, how much the same it was. He'd expected 4 years to change something about it, the way time changes things. It hadn't. "Hey," he said, "is this an okay time?" It wasn't. But he said, "Yeah, Lily's in the bath. I've got a few minutes." "Okay." There was a pause. He heard her breath. "I've been thinking about calling for a while. I don't know how to start this. Can I just say I've been thinking?" "Go ahead." "I've been in therapy," she said, "for 2 years. And there are things I've been working through about us, about why I left the way I did. And I think I owe you some things, some honesty, and maybe more than that." He leaned against the counter. "What kind of more than that?" Another pause. Longer. "I'd like to come to Millbrook, just to talk, face to face. I think we need to have a real conversation about some things, and I don't want to do it over the phone." His chest was very still. "About Lily," he said. "About everything," she said. "About us. About what happened. About I don't know Ethan. About whether some things can be different." He understood what she was saying. He heard exactly what was underneath the words. And he stood in his kitchen with the dish soap still on his hands and felt the pull of it. Not love, not the way it used to be, but something older than love, which was the pull of familiarity. The known thing. The story that had already been told. "Dana," he said, "I know it's a lot to ask. When were you thinking?" "Next weekend if you'd have me." From the bathroom, Lily's voice. Dad, the water's getting cold. He looked at the hallway. He looked at the window above the sink, where Sophie's kitchen light was on the same warm square of yellow he'd been noticing for weeks. Those two things in that order. "I'll think about it," he said. "I need to think." "Okay," Dana said. She sounded like she'd expected that. "Okay, that's fair. I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up. He dried his hands. I went to get Lily out of the bath and found her already in her pajamas, sitting on the edge of the tub, with her hair in a wild tangle, examining a bruise on her knee with the clinical interest of a person who intends to fully document the injury. "Who was that?" she asked. "Work," he said. She looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. She didn't push it. He helped her with her hair. He read to her. He put her to bed. He did all of it on the surface while underneath his brain was running two calculations simultaneously. The way an engine runs when something's not aligned right, technically functional, but you can feel the drag. He didn't text Sophie that night. She texted him at 9:45. "You went quiet. Everything okay?" He stared at the message for a long time. He typed, "Yeah. Long day. Going to sleep early. I was not going to sleep early." He was sitting on his porch in the dark, trying to figure out what he felt. Not what he should feel. What he actually felt. Those were different things, and when Dana entered the picture, the complicated layered weight of a history that didn't end cleanly. He felt the thing he'd started feeling over the past 3 weeks. The lighter, more terrifying possibility of something new. He felt afraid of getting the math wrong. He felt most of all the specific exhaustion of a man who had been alone for 4 years and had just started to not be, and who was now standing at the exact intersection where the past and the present were asking him to choose. He called Marcus. Marcus answered with, "It's 10 o'clock, somebody better be bleeding." Dana called. 3 seconds of silence. "I'm up. Talk." He told Marcus everything. The request to come to Millbrook. The therapy. The about us, and whether things can be different. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was unusual enough that Ethan noticed it. When he finished, Marcus said, "What do you want?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it yet." Ethan leaned his head back against the porch chair. Above him, the Ohio sky was doing what it did in June, thick with stars wide open, the kind of sky that made you feel both very small and somehow less alone. 4 years ago, I would have given anything for that phone call, he said. I sat in this house for 6 months after she left, and I would have picked up the phone at 2 in the morning and driven to wherever she was if she'd just asked me to. I know, but she didn't ask, and I rebuilt things. I put Lily at the center, and I built around her, and I made it work. And then Sophie moved in next door, and I started remembering that I was also a person and not just a function. Marcus was quiet. I don't think I still love Dana, Ethan said. Not the way she means. I don't think I've been in love with her for a long time. What I feel when she calls is history, and guilt, and the habit of caring about someone. That's different from love, Marcus said. I know. So what's the problem? The problem, Ethan said, is that I've been seeing Sophie for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I don't have the right to close a door on my marriage on her behalf. On behalf of something that might or might not turn into something real. Here's what you're not saying, Marcus said. You're not saying you want to go back to Dana. You're saying you're scared that wanting to stay with Sophie is too fast, too new, too much to trust. And so you're using Dana as an excuse to slow down. The words landed like something physical. He didn't answer. Ethan. Maybe. Not maybe. He exhaled. Talk to Sophie, Marcus said. It's been 3 weeks. So you think 3 weeks makes it less real? Talk to her. That's what real looks like. He hung up. He sat for another 10 minutes. Then he went inside. He didn't text Sophie. He decided he would tell her in person. Whatever that conversation was going to be, it deserved more than a phone screen. He made that decision and then lay awake for 2 more hours anyway. Wednesday morning, 6:53. He was pouring coffee when he heard a knock on his back door, the screen door between the kitchen and the yard, the one nobody used except Karen, and apparently Sophie, who was standing on the other side in jeans and a linen shirt, holding a paper bag. "Bagels," she said through the screen. "I had a meeting get canceled and I bought too many." He opened the door. She stepped in, set the bag on the counter, looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I slept fine." "Ethan." He poured her a coffee. She sat at the kitchen table the first time she'd been inside his house, he realized. She sat like she fit there, not tentative, not over-careful. She sat the way she did everything, like she'd decided to be present and was committed to it. He sat across from her. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay." "Dana called last night." Sophie's hands closed slightly around the coffee mug. Nothing else changed. "Okay," she said again in the same word, but different weight. "She wants to come here, to talk. She said she's been in therapy, and she wants to have a real conversation about whether things could be different." Sophie looked at him steadily. He had learned by now that this was her way of managing emotion, not shutting it down, but giving it structure, holding it still while she processed. "And what do you want to do?" "I don't know yet. That's the honest answer." She nodded once. "Thank you for telling me." "Sophie, I want you to know. You don't owe me an explanation," she said. "We've been on one date." "That's not—" "I know it's more than one date," she said over him. "I know what this is. I'm not pretending I don't." She stopped, looked at the coffee. "But I also know that what you had with her was 4 years and a marriage and a child. I'm not going to tell you what to do with that." He leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to tell me what to do. I'm telling you because you matter. What we're doing matters. And I'm not the kind of man who hides things from people who matter." She looked at him. Her jaw did that thing again. The holding. "I told Ryan something once," she said. "I told him that what I needed more than anything wasn't someone who chose me over everyone else. It was someone who was honest with me, even when the honest thing was complicated. He couldn't do that." She looked up. "You just did." "It's still complicated." "I know. I need a few days to think." "Take them," she said. She stood up. She left the bagels on the counter. She paused at the back door. "Ethan." "Yeah." "Whatever you decide it for yourself. Not for me, not for Dana, not for what you think you're supposed to want." She pushed the screen door open. "That's the only way any decision you make actually counts." She crossed the yard and went into her own house. He sat at the kitchen table with 2 coffees and a bag of bagels and thought about what she'd said until it was time to open the shop. He called Dana that afternoon. "I'll see you Saturday," he said. "But Dana, I need you to understand something before you come. I'm in a different place than I was 4 years ago, so whatever this conversation is, I'm coming to it as who I am now, not who I was." A pause. "That's fair," she said. "I'll see you Saturday." He hung up. He texted Sophie. "Saturday. I'll tell you how it goes Sunday." Sophie. "Okay." 1 word. But she sent it immediately. And that immediately mattered more to him than she probably knew. Saturday, 10:15. Dana Brooks stood in his driveway looking like herself, which should have felt like more than it did. She was still had the way of standing like she was about to say something important. He watched her through the window for a moment before going to the door. He opened it. She looked at him. "You look good," she said. "Come in," he said. They sat in the living room, the couch and the armchair, not side by side, an accidental but appropriate geography. She looked around the house the way people look at places they were once in and are now outside of. Taking inventory. "You repapered the hallway," she said. "Lily picked the pattern." She smiled at that. Then the smile became something more complicated. She talked for a while. About therapy. About the patterns she'd identified, the way she'd confused restlessness for unhappiness, and unhappiness for the wrong life, and the wrong life for the wrong person. About how it had taken her 2 years to understand that what she'd run from wasn't Millbrook or Ethan, but herself. That she'd been looking for something outside that she hadn't built inside yet. He listened. He listened the way he'd learned to listen to Sophie, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually tracking what was being said. When she finished, he said, "I hear you, and I believe you. I believe you've done real work." "But," she said. "But I'm not the same man you left," he said. "And even if I were Dana you left, you made that choice, and I had to build something from inside that choice. I built a life. I built Lily's life. And somewhere in the last month I've started building something else. Something for me. And I won't dismantle that to revisit something that already had its ending." She looked at him. Her eyes filled. She didn't let the tears fall. He had always respected that about her, the specific discipline of her grief. "Is there someone?" she said quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Is it serious?" "It's real," he said. "That's what I know so far. It's real." She nodded slowly. She looked at her hands. "She's lucky," she said finally. "I think it's mutual." Dana stood up. She was composed, the way only someone who'd been learning composure in a therapist's office for 2 years could be. She picked up her jacket. She looked at him at the door. "Tell Lily I'd like to call her this week, if that's okay." "I'll tell her." "Take care of yourself, Ethan. I mean that." "I know you do." She walked out. He closed the door. He stood in his living room in the sudden silence and took a full inventory of himself, the way he did with an engine. He was trying to understand, methodical, honest, no wishful thinking. He checked for regret. He found some, the low residual kind, the kind you feel for things you can't change and aren't meant to. He checked for doubt. He found less than he expected. He checked for something else, something harder to name. He found it. It felt more than anything like relief. He waited until Sunday morning to go next door. He knocked. Sophie opened the door in an oversized shirt, hair up, reading glasses. She quickly took off a small, unguarded moment that he filed away like something valuable. "How'd it go?" she asked. "She left," he said. "I told her I was building something else and I wasn't going to dismantle it." Sophie looked at him very carefully. "You said that?" "Those exact words." She stepped back from the door. "You want coffee?" "Yeah," he said. "I really do." He stepped inside. It was the first time he crossed her threshold, and he was aware of it as a threshold, not just a door, but a line. The particular kind of line that only matters when you're paying attention to what side of it you're standing on. He stepped across it. She went to make coffee. He sat at her kitchen table. Neither of them said anything for a minute. Then she set a mug in front of him, sat across from him, and looked at him. The way she always looked at him, not with expectation, not with performance. Just with that clear, direct attention that had been making him feel visible since the first night she knocked on his door with drive-in tickets. "Thank you," he said, "for the coffee. For the last few days. For giving me room to think without making me feel like I was doing something wrong by needing to." Sophie wrapped both hands around her own mug. "You weren't doing something wrong. You were doing something honest. There's a difference." "Ryan never gave you room like that," he said. It wasn't a question. "Ryan never gave me anything like that." A pause. "Neither did a few others. I'm going to need you to know," he said carefully, "that I understand how much it costs to trust again after people have made it expensive. I understand that, because it costs me too. And I'm asking you, I'm not demanding anything, I'm asking to keep letting me try. Even when I go quiet. Even when I'm working something out. I promise I'll tell you what I'm working out." She looked at him for a long moment. "I can do that," she said. "If you can do the same for me. Because I'm going to go quiet too sometimes. I'm going to pull back and convince myself it's fine when it isn't. And I need you to push back on that." "I'll push back on that." "Good." She picked up her coffee. "Then I think we have a deal." It was not a declaration. It was not a scene from a movie. It was two people in a kitchen on a Sunday morning deciding together that the real thing was worth the real work. And that all of it, the drive-in, and the library, and the bagels, and the one terrible night, and the honest conversation that came after that, was what it looked like when something actually began. Not a perfect beginning, but an honest one. And Ethan Brooks, who had spent 4 years rebuilding everything except himself, was finally starting to understand that honest was the only foundation worth building on. The deal they made on that Sunday morning didn't come with instructions. That was the part nobody tells you about, the part after the honest conversation, after the decision to try, after the moment that feels like a beginning. Nobody tells you that the real test isn't the dramatic moment. It's the Tuesday. It's the Thursday. It's every ordinary day where you have to choose quietly and without an audience to keep showing up. Ethan kept showing up. It wasn't always graceful. Sometimes it looked like him standing outside the library at closing time because Lily had another Thursday session with Sophie, and he'd arrived 20 minutes early and didn't want to admit he'd done it on purpose. Sometimes it looked like Sophie knocking on his back door with leftovers she claimed were too much for one person, and both of them knowing that wasn't entirely the reason. Sometimes it looked like two people who had learned to be alone, finding out incrementally and sometimes painfully how to be together without losing the parts of themselves that had been built in the alone. 4 weeks after the Sunday morning in Sophie's kitchen, Marcus finally got his introduction. It happened the way a lot of things happened in Millbrook, accidentally on purpose at a backyard cookout. Marcus threw for no reason other than it was July, and he had a grill and a general belief that people should spend summer evenings outside. Ethan brought Lily. He texted Sophie separately and said casually that she was welcome if she wanted no pressure. She showed up with a pasta salad that Marcus later described as life-altering. Ethan watched Marcus meet Sophie and felt something that was almost anxiety. The irrational fear that the two people he trusted most might not see what he saw in each other. He didn't need to have worried. Marcus shook Sophie's hand, said, "So you're the one who made the jalapeno popcorn?" And Sophie said, "3 kinds for the record." And Marcus said, "I already like you better than most people I've known for years." Lily, who had stationed herself next to Sophie as though they had a prior arrangement, tugged Marcus's sleeve. "She knows all the horse books," she said, as if this were the final credential. Marcus looked at Ethan over both of their heads with an expression that said plainly, without a single word, "Don't mess this up." Ethan looked away. He already knew. The cookout went 3 hours longer than planned. Lily fell asleep on a lawn chair at 9:30, which she would deny the following morning. Sophie and Marcus talked for 45 minutes about things Ethan couldn't fully follow. Something about public library funding and the politics of small-town infrastructure, and Marcus, who had no particular investment in library funding before that night, came away from it shaking his head and saying, "She's right about all of it. She's completely right." On the drive home, Lily woke up just long enough to say from the back seat, "Is Sophie coming?" She drove herself bug. "She's going to her own house." "Oh." A pause. "She should just live with us." "Go back to sleep, Lily." "I'm serious." "I know you are. Sleep." She slept. He drove. I thought about what she'd said with the particular mixture of warmth and caution that had become his default setting. Something good was growing in the space between his house and Sophie's, between Thursdays at the library and Sunday mornings in her kitchen, and text messages at 10:30 at night that started with one thing and ended somewhere neither of them had planned. He could feel it growing. And because he was who he was, he could also feel himself monitoring it, checking for cracks, testing the structure, trying to identify in advance what might go wrong. Sophie had told him once at her kitchen table with coffee going cold between them, "You do this thing where something good happens and you immediately start looking for the place it's going to break." He hadn't denied it. "I know," he'd said. "I've been doing it for 4 years. It's a hard habit to break." "I know," she'd said. "I do it too, but I'm trying to catch myself when I do it, so I can just let the good thing be good, for as long as it's good." I was trying. Some days he was better at it than others. The week after the cookout was one of the better weeks. Sophie came to dinner on Wednesday, not a scheduled thing. She texted at 5, saying she had leftover chicken, and did he have vegetables, and he said he had vegetables, and they made something together in his kitchen that turned out better than either of them expected. Lily ate 2 full servings, which was a reliable indicator of quality. After dinner, Sophie helped with the battle hamster drawings Lily was currently obsessed with, and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and watched them bent over the paper together, and let himself carefully feel the weight of how much he wanted this to be permanent. He let himself feel it. He didn't look for where it was going to break. For about 24 hours that worked. Then he got the message from Craig Ellison. Craig Ellison was a man. Ethan had known peripherally for years. They'd gone to the same high school, moved in overlapping circles in the way everyone in a town of 11,000 did. Craig was the kind of man who'd been locally successful in the specific way that made him slightly too aware of himself. Owned a car dealership, sat on the town council, showed up at every event that had cameras nearby. He and Ethan had never been friends exactly. More like familiar strangers who knew enough about each other to be polite. The message came through Facebook, which was itself mildly alarming because Ethan checked Facebook approximately 4 times a year. It said, "Hey man, seeing you and that librarian out around town. Wanted to give you a heads up, buddy to buddy. People talk in this town. You know how it is. Some folks think it's a little unexpected. Just thought you should know before it becomes a thing." Ethan read it. He read it twice. He put his phone face down on the workbench and picked up a wrench and held it so tightly his hand ached. Danny walked past, stopped. "You okay, boss?" "Fine." Danny looked at the phone, looked at Ethan's hand. "Okay," he said with the wisdom of a 22-year-old who had learned exactly when not to ask questions. Ethan stood there for 3 full minutes. Then he picked up his phone. He went to Craig Ellison's message. He typed, "Craig, I appreciate you reaching out. I want to be clear, there is no heads up needed. Who I see and who I spend my time with is not something I'm looking for input on. Sophie is someone I care about. If people in this town have a problem with that, they're welcome to bring it directly to me." He sent it. He put his phone away. He went back to work. But the wrench in his hand felt different for the rest of the afternoon. Not because of Craig Ellison. Craig Ellison was largely irrelevant to anything that actually mattered. But because the message had done what such messages are designed to do, it had put a mirror up. And what Ethan saw in it was the question he hadn't been asking himself directly. Was he ready to do this publicly? Not just privately. Not just in his kitchen and Sophie's kitchen and at Marcus's backyard and the library on Thursdays. But in Millbrook. Out loud. In the diner and the grocery store and the hardware store and everywhere that his and Sophie's lives were visible to the people who'd known him for 34 years. He knew what some of those people thought. Not everyone. Most people in his life were decent. But some, and he knew who, and he knew the precise flavor of their judgment. Some people would look at Sophie and see her size before they saw her. Would make the kind of small poisonous assumptions that people make when they've decided the category before they've met the person. Would raise an eyebrow and say something that sounded almost like a compliment and wasn't. He knew this. The question, the real question, was what he was going to do with knowing it. He closed the shop at 5. He picked up Lily. He made dinner. He did all of it on automatic while underneath he was running the calculation he needed to stop running and just answer. At 8:30, after Lily was in bed, he texted Sophie. Not the message he'd been composing in his head all afternoon. Just, "You free? Can I come over?" She texted back. Doors open. He crossed the yard. She was on her couch with a book she set down when he came in. She looked at him, one long look, kind. She'd become fluent in the one that read him before he spoke. "What happened?" she said. He sat in the chair across from her. He told her about the message. He read it to her word for word. She listened. She didn't get angry. He'd half expected anger. He might have felt better with anger, something external to react to. Instead, she went quiet in that deliberate way, and he watched her process it. "How many times," she said finally, "do you think I've gotten a version of that message in my life, about different things, different men?" He hadn't thought about it from that angle. "A lot," she said. She wasn't asking him to feel sorry for her, just establishing the fact. "People have been deciding what I should and shouldn't have for as long as I can remember. Who I should be attracted to. Who should be attracted to me. What I'm supposed to want, and what I'm supposed to accept." She paused. "So when I ask you what you want to do, I already know what Craig Ellison's opinion is worth. What I don't know is what yours is." Ethan leaned forward. I texted him back. I told him Sophie is someone I care about, and if people have a problem, they can bring it to me directly. She blinked. You already sent that. Before I came over. She looked at him for a long moment. He couldn't fully read it. It was one of those expressions she had that was layered where multiple things were happening at once, and she was deciding which one to let out first. Ethan, she said. Yeah. You didn't come here to ask me if you should send it. No. You already knew the answer. I did. So why did you come over? He thought about it, honestly. Because I wanted you to know I sent it. I didn't want to handle something about us without telling you. She looked at him. Her eyes filled. She didn't let it go far, a controlled moment brief, then pulled back in. But he saw it. He saw the specific thing. It was not sadness. The opposite. The particular emotion that looks like grief, but is actually the body catching up to receiving something it had stopped expecting. You know what Ryan would have done, she said very quietly. Yeah, I think I do. He would have not said anything to Craig. He would have told me not to worry about it. He would have suggested very gently that maybe we could be a little less visible for a while, until things settled down. I'm not Ryan. I know that, she said. I've known that for a while. I'm still recalibrating. She wiped her eye with the back of her hand, fast matter of fact. Give me a second. Take all the time you need. She laughed a surprised, slightly wet laugh. You're infuriating, you know that. Why? Because you keep being exactly what I'd given up expecting. He didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to add. She took her second. She composed herself. She looked at him. There's something I should probably tell you, she said. About next month. The shift in her tone made him pay attention differently. Okay. The Millbrook Library is co-hosting the County Literacy Fundraiser. It's a big dinner thing, town hall, dressed up, half the town will be there. Board members, council members, all of that. She paused. I've been asked to speak, which is fine. The part I haven't mentioned is that there's a +1 form, and I hadn't filled it in yet because I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure of what? Of whether you'd want to. In front of all those people. Town Hall Ethan. That's Craig Ellison's territory. That's everyone who knows you, everyone who knew you and Dana, everyone who... She stopped herself. I wasn't going to ask. He looked at her steadily. Are you asking now? She met his eyes. I'm telling you it exists. That's the same thing. A beat. Yeah, she said. I guess it is. He said without pausing. Fill in the form. Her breath caught slightly. He heard it. You don't have to. Sophie, fill in the form. I'll wear the navy shirt. She pressed her lips together, nodded once. Okay. He stayed another hour. They talked about other things. Lily's upcoming school concert, a novel Sophie was reading that she kept describing as infuriating in a way that was clearly a compliment, a problem at the shop that had been annoying him for a week. Normal things. Good things. The kind of things that build the texture of a shared life before you're fully aware that's what you're building. When he left, she walked him to the door. He stopped on the step. She leaned against the doorframe. For the record, she said, what you said in that text, about people bringing it directly to you, I've never had anyone do that. Get used to it, he said. She gave him a look that contained he thought about 6 different emotions layered over each other. Don't say things like that, she said. Why not? Because I'm trying very hard to go slow, and you keep making it difficult. He felt the smile before he could stop it. He turned and walked back across the yard. He heard her door close behind him. He went inside his own house and stood in the kitchen and looked at the dented trash can. He bought a new one the next morning. He didn't make a thing of it. He just did it. He put it in the corner where the old one had been, and he stood back and looked at it for a moment, and then he went to work. Danny noticed the new trash can. Danny said nothing. He was still, Ethan thought, an excellent employee. The fundraiser was 3 weeks away. In those 3 weeks, things between him and Sophie settled into a rhythm that was both more comfortable and more terrifying than what came before. Comfortable because they'd stopped performing for each other. They'd crossed into the territory of real, which looked like Sophie correcting him when he was wrong about something, and him doing the same, and both of them being annoyed for about 7 minutes, and then fine. Terrifying because real meant there was something to lose. Real meant the stakes were actual. There was one night 2 weeks before the fundraiser when it almost came apart. It started small. It always starts small. Sophie had come to dinner, a normal Wednesday dinner. The three of them pasta again, because it was Lily's favorite, and they'd fallen into a rotation. Lily had a meltdown in the middle of it. Not a spectacular one, she was 7, not a toddler, but the kind that came out of nowhere over nothing visible, the way kids' meltdowns often do. She'd started crying about her drawing not looking right, and then the crying became about missing mommy, and then the crying became about something formless and deep that 7-year-olds can feel but can't articulate, and that broke Ethan's heart every single time. He'd handled it the way he always handled it. Calm, present on the floor next to her chair, letting her cry while he said steady, quiet things and rubbed her back until it passed. Sophie had cleared the plates without being asked, quietly giving them space. After. Lily in bed, calmer, clutching her rabbit. Ethan back in the kitchen. Sophie washing dishes at his sink. He came in and stood in the doorway and watched her at his sink for a moment. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." She kept washing. "How often does that happen?" "Less than it used to, a couple times a month." "Always about Dana?" "Not always, but sometimes it surfaces that way." He leaned against the doorframe. "She manages it well for a 7-year-old, but she still feels it." Sophie turned off the water. She dried her hands. She turned to face him. "Can I say something that might be hard to hear?" His posture changed slightly. "Yeah, I've been coming to dinner 2-3 times a week. Lily's been at the library every Thursday. She introduced me to her teacher as my person who knows the horse books last week, which was..." Sophie stopped. "She's attaching Ethan, real attachment. And She paused. "I'm not going anywhere. I want to be clear that I'm not planning to go anywhere. But I think we need to be deliberate about this. About what we're telling her, what it means, how we present it. Because she's already built an idea in her head, and if something goes wrong between us, you think something's going to go wrong. I think we can't know that, and I think you know we can't know that." He crossed his arms. He knew she was right. He hated for about 4 seconds that she was right. "She doesn't need another loss," Sophie said, quietly, carefully. "And I don't want to be something that happens to her. I want to be something that's good for her, which means we should be thoughtful." He uncrossed his arms. He rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the ceiling. "You're right," he said. "I know this isn't easy to hear." "No, you're right. He stopped. "I've been letting it grow organically and telling myself that was fine. But Lily doesn't have the context to understand organic. She just has what she sees." "Yeah? So what do you think we should do?" She looked at him. "I think we keep doing what we're doing. I think we keep being honest with each other. And I think at some point soon, not now, not this week, but soon, we have a conversation with her. About what I am. What this is. In language a 7-year-old can hold. You want to have the conversation with her? I think we should. Together." He looked at her standing in his kitchen in the light above his sink, talking about his daughter with the same seriousness she brought to everything that mattered to her. He thought about the night she'd made 3 kinds of popcorn. He thought about the note she'd sent with the library books alphabetized by horse name. He thought about the way she'd cleared the plates tonight without being asked, quietly giving him room. "Okay," he said. "We'll do it together." She exhaled. "Okay." And Sophie. "Yeah. Thank you for saying the hard thing. Thank you for not making me regret." She stayed another hour. He didn't ask her to stay. She just stayed, and he let her, and they sat on his couch and watched something on TV that neither of them could have described afterward, and it was fine. It was more than fine. When she left, he stood at the door and watched her cross the yard, and felt with a clarity he hadn't expected that this was someone who loved his daughter, not as an accessory to him, but as her own person. Who saw Lily the way she saw him, directly, without flinching. He thought, if I let this go, if I mess this up, If I let fear make the decision for me, I will regret it for the rest of my life. He thought, I am not going to let fear make this decision. He went to bed. The fundraiser arrived on a Saturday evening in the middle of August. He wore the navy shirt. He picked up Sophie at 6:30. She opened the door in a deep green dress that she wore like she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space, which was maybe the most attractive thing he'd ever seen. "You look extraordinary," he said. He said it plainly, the way you say something true. She looked at him. Navy shirt was the right call. They drove to town hall. They walked in together. He did not reach for her hand outside. He waited until they were through the door, until they were in the room, until the room was full of the people he'd known all his life, and the people who'd watched him through his divorce, and the people who'd had opinions about all of it, and then he reached for her hand. She looked at him. He held her hand. They walked to their table. He felt from the periphery of his vision the particular alertness of a room that has noticed something. He did not look around to find it. He looked at Sophie. She was watching him. "You okay?" she said quietly. "More than okay," he said. "You—" She looked down at their joined hands, then up at him. And she smiled, the full one, the real one, the one that started before she decided and ended after she tried to stop it. "More than okay," she said. Across the room, he saw Craig Ellison notice them. Craig held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Ethan turned back to Sophie. She was already reading the program, her thumb moving over the words, making small annotations in her head, the way she always did with text. Already herself. Already fully present. Already, he realized, already home in a way that had nothing to do with a building. He'd been in this town his whole life. He'd never felt more like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sophie spoke beautifully. Of course she did. She talked about reading like it was a survival skill and a love language and a civil right all at once. And the room was quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when someone is saying something true. He watched her at the podium and thought, this woman walked in next door with drive-in tickets, and she turned my whole world around, and she did it so gradually and so honestly that I didn't even know it was happening until it had already happened. Afterward, at the cocktail hour, Marcus appeared from somewhere and clapped him on the shoulder and said, "She crushed that speech." She did. "You good." Ethan looked across the room at Sophie, who was talking to someone from the library board, animated and confident, her green dress catching the light. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good." "You're more than good," Marcus said. "Stop underselling it." He laughed. On the drive home, Sophie was quiet for a while. Then she said, "You held my hand." "I did." "In front of everyone." "That's generally what in front of everyone means." She looked out the window. "Ryan would have made sure we arrived separately." "I know." "You held my hand in front of Craig Ellison." "I noticed him, yeah." She turned to look at him. "Why did you do it right then when you saw him?" He thought about it honestly. "Because I wanted him to see that the answer to his message was not a text. It was a fact. And facts are better demonstrated than explained." She was quiet for a moment. "Ethan." "Yeah. I'm falling in love with you." He heard it land. He didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't know the answer, but because the answer deserved the right moment, not a stoplight. He pulled into her driveway. He put the truck in park. He turned to face her. "Sophie Bennett," he said. "I've been falling since the drive-in. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud until you were." She looked at him. "That was 3 months ago," she said. "I know. You've been falling for 3 months, and you didn't say anything." "I'm a slow processor," he said. "You knew that." She laughed. That laugh. He was never going to get tired of that laugh. "You absolute—" He kissed her. Not dramatically, not like a scene, like a man who had made a decision and was done waiting to act on it. She kissed him back the same way, decided, present, no performance. When they stopped, she looked at him with those eyes that saw the thing he actually was. "Took you long enough," she said. "I'm here now." "You are," she said. "You really are." She got out of the truck. She walked to her door. She turned back once. He was already watching. She went inside. He sat in the driveway for a long moment, not troubled this time, not calculating, not monitoring for cracks. Just sitting in something that felt complete in the particular way of things that are real. Then he went home. He checked on Lily, asleep in her room, rabbit in her arms, one leg kicked out from the blanket, the way she always slept. He stood in her doorway for a moment. He went to his room. He lay in the dark. And for the first time in 4 years, the quiet felt like peace. Not the absence of something, the presence of it. He told Lily on a Sunday morning in September, not because he'd planned it for that specific morning, but because Lily walked into the kitchen at 7:45, climbed onto her chair, looked at him over her cereal, and said completely without preamble, "Are you and Sophie together?" Ethan set down his coffee. Lily stared at him with those dark eyes that had inherited his stubbornness and her mother's precision, and combined them into something he had no defense against. "What made you ask that?" he said. "You kissed her in this driveway," Lily said. "2 weeks ago, I was getting a glass of water." He looked at his daughter, his 7-year-old daughter who kept battle hamster lore and noticed things from kitchen windows at 11 at night. "Yeah," he said. "We are." Lily picked up her spoon. She ate a bite of cereal. She chewed with the thoughtfulness of someone processing significant information. "Good," she said. "Good. I've been waiting for you to figure it out." She took another bite. It took a long time. Ethan stared at her. "You're 7. "I know." She said it with a patience that was almost insulting. "Are you going to tell her I know? We were actually going to talk to you about it, together." Lily looked up. She was going to be there. That was the plan. Something crossed her face. Not surprise, but a kind of quiet gladness. The particular gladness of a child who gets confirmation that a thing she hoped was true actually is. She looked back at her cereal. "Okay," she said. "When?" "I'll ask her to come for breakfast next Sunday." "Can she make the banana pancakes?" "I'll ask." "Don't forget to ask." "I won't forget Lily." She ate her cereal. He drank his coffee. The morning light came through the kitchen window and landed between them on the table, and the whole thing was so ordinary and so complete that he had to look away for a second. He texted Sophie. "She knows. She saw us in the driveway 2 weeks ago. She says it took a long time, and she's been waiting for us to figure it out. Also, she wants to know if you can make banana pancakes." Sophie's response came in 4 separate texts, approximately 30 seconds apart. "She saw us. She knew for 2 weeks and said nothing. She is 7 years old and has more composure than most adults I know. I can absolutely make the banana pancakes." He put his phone down. He looked at his daughter who had finished her cereal and was now drawing something on the back of a school newsletter. A horse probably, or possibly a battle hamster, he'd learned not to assume. "Hey, Bug," he said. "Yeah. You good with all of it?" She looked up. She considered the question seriously the way she considered most things that mattered. "She makes you talk more," she said finally. "Like you used to come home and just do stuff. Now you come home and you talk. And you laugh more." She went back to her drawing. "So yeah, I'm good." He sat with that for a long time. The following Sunday, Sophie made banana pancakes in his kitchen while Lily sat on the counter and provided commentary on the batter consistency, and Ethan made coffee and watched 2 people he loved occupy his space like they'd always been there. He'd used that word in his head, loved without planning to. He let it sit. He didn't examine it. He let it be true. They had the conversation. Not a formal one. It happened naturally over pancakes the way real conversations in families happen sideways in the middle of other things. Sophie said she cared about Lily very much, and she was going to keep showing up, and she also wanted Lily to always feel like she could talk to her if something felt weird or wrong. Lily listened with her full attention, which she reserved for things that deserved it. Then she said, "Do you like battle hamsters?" Sophie said, "I've come around to them strongly." Lily nodded once the way she'd nodded when she'd decided Ethan could help with the horse books, and said, "Okay, good." That was it. That was the whole conversion of something uncertain into something understood. Ethan thought watching them negotiate the last of the pancakes that some of the most important moments in a life, don't announce themselves. They just arrive shaped like ordinary Sunday mornings, and you recognize them only afterward, when they've already become part of who you are. October came. October brought the thing Ethan had not anticipated, which was Sophie's mother. Eleanor Bennett arrived on a Thursday evening with a rolling suitcase and a critical eye and a warmth that lived 3 layers beneath both of those things and took patience to find. She was 64 trim, with Sophie's directness, but none of Sophie's ease, and she'd come for what was supposed to be a 2-week visit to assess her Parkinson's management with a new specialist in Columbus. Sophie had told Ethan she was coming with the specific warning tone of a person who loves a parent and knows them clearly. "She's going to look at you," Sophie said. "And she's going to look at me. And she's going to have opinions about both of those things that she will deliver indirectly through remarks about coffee and home maintenance." "That sounds manageable," he said. "You haven't met her yet." He met Eleanor on Friday evening. Sophie brought her to his house for dinner because Sophie's guest room was occupied and his kitchen was larger, and he'd offered, which in retrospect he understood was both kind and strategically unwise. Eleanor shook his hand, looked at his house with the specific inventory-taking gaze of a woman who had strong ideas about how things should be kept, and said, "You have good bones in this house," which was either a compliment to the architecture or a conditional statement. He wasn't sure yet. Lily, who had no social anxiety whatsoever, introduced herself by full name, announced that Sophie was her dad's girlfriend, and she approved, and then asked Eleanor if she played chess. Eleanor blinked. Then she said, "I do actually. Do you?" "I'm learning," Lily said. "Sophie's teaching me, but she's too easy on me." Eleanor looked at Sophie, then back at Lily. "I am not too easy on anyone," she said. Lily's expression was the closest thing to delight Ethan had ever seen on her face, in a context that didn't involve horses. "Good," she said. Sophie looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Sophie. They both looked at Eleanor and Lily, who were already moving toward the living room, Eleanor asking questions about what openings Lily knew, Lily answering with confident inaccuracy. "I did not see that coming," Sophie said quietly. "Your daughter and my mother," Ethan said. "She's not my—" He stopped. He looked at Sophie. "I almost said she's not my mother." Sophie looked at him steadily. "I know what you almost said. Is that okay?" She blinked. Her jaw did the thing. She looked away for exactly 1 second and then back. "Yeah," she said. "That's okay." They made dinner together in his kitchen, while from the living room Eleanor's voice carried, "That's not how the night moves. Try again." And Lily's voice, "I know how the night moves." And Eleanor, "Then show me." And Lily, after a pause, "Okay, fine, remind me." Ethan laughed. Sophie laughed. He handed her a wooden spoon, and for a moment their hands were both on it, and neither of them moved. "Thank you," she said, "for this." "You don't have to thank me. I do. She needed this. She needs to see me." Sophie stopped. "She spent a lot of years worrying about me, thinking I was lonely. I was some of the time. She knew it even when I denied it. And now she's in a living room watching a 7-year-old argue with her about chess, and she can see that I'm—" She stopped again. "I'm not lonely anymore." He let go of the spoon. He turned to face her fully. "Sophie, don't make it a big thing," she said, already turning back to the stove. "We have pasta to finish. Sophie." She turned back. Her eyes were bright. "I know," he said. "Me neither." She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned back to the pasta. They were quiet after that. But it was the kind of quiet that was full rather than empty. The kind of quiet that happens when two people have said the thing they needed to say and don't need to repeat it. Eleanor stayed 9 days. On the last evening, she and Ethan sat on his porch while Sophie was inside with Lily, who had demanded one more chess game and was, by Eleanor's account, improving rapidly and somewhat alarmingly. Eleanor had a glass of wine. Ethan had coffee. The September now. October air had gone cool and clear the way Ohio autumn does. Eleanor said without any particular setup, "Sophie's father left when she was 12. Ethan looked at her. He didn't leave badly. He didn't leave violently. He just left. Eleanor looked at her glass. He remarried. He had other children. He was present enough that Sophie couldn't fully hate him, which is sometimes worse, because she spent years trying to understand what it was about her that wasn't enough to make him stay. She paused. She's never fully stopped asking that question, even when she thinks she has. He let the weight of that sit. I know, Eleanor continued, that she seems confident. She is confident. But there are places inside her that she rebuilt from something broken. And those places are strong now, but they're sensitive, if you press on them wrong. I'm not going to press on them wrong, he said. Eleanor looked at him. You can't promise that. You're human. You're going to get it wrong sometimes. I know. What I'm asking, she said, is that when you do, when either of you does, you don't run. You stay and you fix it. He looked at this woman who had raised a daughter alone after being left, who had developed Parkinson's and reorganized her own life without complaint, who had come here and sized him up through remarks about coffee and chess games and housebones, and was now on the last night saying the real thing directly. He respected her enormously for it. I'm not running, he said. I have spent 4 years running not from people, from myself. I'm done with it. I'm staying. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Good, she said. She picked up her wine. You have very good bones. He understood this time that she meant him. She left the next morning. Sophie walked her to the car, and Ethan stood in the doorway and watched them say goodbye. Sophie with her arm around her mother's shoulders. Eleanor patting her hand, something passing between them that was private and old and not for him to see. He looked away. When Sophie came back up the steps, her eyes were red at the edges. She walked past him into the house. He followed. She stood in his kitchen for a moment with her back to him. He came up behind her and put his arms around her from behind. Not saying anything, just present. She put her hands over his. She likes you, Sophie said. I like her. She told me last night that you have integrity. From Eleanor, that's basically a Nobel Prize. I'll add it to the trophy case. She laughed. The laugh was wet at the edges. She turned around inside his arms and looked at him. I'm okay, she said. I know you are. I miss her when she leaves. I always miss her when she leaves. And now the leaves are turning and she's driving back to Cleveland and She stopped. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. I know. I am anyway. She pulled back slightly. Thank you. For having her. For being... She shook her head. You keep doing things that I run out of words for. I'm a man of action, he said. She laughed again, cleaner this time. She stepped back. She smoothed her shirt. She was herself again, composed, present, the specific resilience of someone who'd built it deliberately. I should go home, she said. I need to reorganize her guest room and catch up on work I missed. Okay. She picked up her jacket. She paused at the door. Ethan? Yeah. I love you. She said it the way she said everything that mattered, directly, without dramatic staging, just the fact of it placed in the air between them, like something real. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. He stopped in front of her. I love you, he said. I have for a while. I should have said it sooner. She looked up at him. You said it when you were ready. I should have been ready sooner. You were ready exactly when you were ready, she said firmly. That's how it works. He kissed her. She kissed him back. It lasted long enough to mean something, and not so long that Lily, if she came downstairs, would have cause for commentary. When they stopped, Sophie pressed her forehead against his chin for a moment. Just a moment. Then she stepped back. She went home. He stood in his kitchen alone in the quiet that was not empty anymore, and understood that love, real love, the kind that comes after the wreckage and the rebuilding, the kind that finds you when you've stopped looking and started just living, that love doesn't feel the way you expect it to feel. It doesn't arrive as thunder. It arrives as warmth. Slow, steady building from the inside out, until one day you're standing in your kitchen and you realize the cold draft you'd been living with for years is simply gone. He looked at the corner where the new trash can stood. He thought, yeah, that's about right. November came fast, the way November does in Ohio one week. It's autumn the next, the trees are stripped, and the cold is serious. Ethan had learned over the years to take the seasonal change as a signal to assess things. What did the shop need before winter? What did the house need? What did Lily need? He added a new category this year. What did they need, the three of them, and Sophie, and the thing they were building? The answer surprised him with its simplicity. They didn't need anything dramatic. They didn't need a milestone or a gesture. They just needed to keep doing what they were doing, showing up, telling the truth, choosing each other on the ordinary days, not just the days that felt significant. He was getting good at the ordinary days. Sophie had started leaving a few things at his house. Not planned. It happened gradually. A cardigan she'd forgotten, a book she'd been lending Lily, her good coffee in his cabinet because she'd said his grocery brand stuff was a crime she could no longer participate in. He noticed it and said nothing, because saying something would have made it into an event, and it wasn't an event. It was just a life accumulating. Lily noticed the coffee. She said, "Is Sophie moving in?" "No," Ethan said. "She lives next door." "But her coffee's here." "Her coffee visits." Lily looked at the coffee, looked at him. When people's coffee visits, it usually means they visit a lot. Yes, that's accurate. "I'm okay with it," she said, as though he'd asked. "In case you were wondering." "I wasn't." He stopped. "Thank you, Lily." "You're welcome." She went back to her drawing. He texted Sophie. "Your coffee has apparently moved in. Lily has opinions." Sophie. "What are her opinions?" "She's in favor." "Obviously, she has excellent judgment." It's the horse books all over again. He smiled at his phone. Danny walked past, said nothing. The first twist came on a Friday afternoon in November from a direction he hadn't seen. Ethan was closing up the shop when his phone rang. Unknown number with a Columbus area code. He answered out of habit. "Ethan Brooks," a woman's voice, professional. "This is Jennifer Mosley from Columbus Auto Group. We've been following your shop's reputation in the county, your reviews, your customer retention numbers. We'd like to talk to you about a partnership opportunity. We're expanding into the Millbrook adjacent market, and we're looking for an established independent shop to anchor the service division. Are you open to a conversation?" He stood in the parking lot with the phone to his ear and the November wind coming in from the west. "What kind of conversation?" he said. "The kind that comes with a significant offer," she said. "Acquisition or full partnership, depending on your priorities. Either way, you'd stay on as head of operations, your current staff would be retained, and the financial terms would be..." She named a number. He didn't move. "Can I ask how you found me?" he said. "Craig Ellison, actually, town council. He recommended you specifically." "Of all the names in the world." "Give me a week," he said. "I'll call you back." He hung up. He sat in his truck in the empty parking lot for 15 minutes. Then he drove to Sophie's. She was on her couch with papers spread around her library board material. Budget projections, something dense with numbers. She looked up when he came in. She read him in one look. "Sit down," she said. "Talk." He told her everything. The call, the number, the Craig Ellison connection, that he still couldn't decide whether to find ironic or simply strange. She listened the way she always listened. Then she said, "What do you feel?" "Terrified," he said immediately. "And something else, something that might be interested." "Tell me the terrified part first." "The shop is mine. I built it from 3 bays and 1 employee. My name's on it. My grandfather taught me to read an engine block in that building. If I sell or partner or whatever, I lose something I can't get back." "And the interested part?" "The money would mean Lily's college is covered. The money would mean I stop working 7 days a week mentally, even when I'm not physically there. The money would mean..." He stopped. "It would mean I had options I don't currently have." "Like what?" He looked at her. He hadn't said this out loud yet. "Like maybe not being tied to this zip code indefinitely. Like maybe having the flexibility to, I don't know, things." Sophie looked at him carefully. "You've been thinking about the future," she said. Not a question. "Yeah. Our future." He met her eyes. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of someone recalibrating. Ethan, she said, I want to be very careful here, because this is your decision, and your business, and your livelihood. I am not going to tell you what to do. I know. I'm not asking you to. I know you're not. She paused. I will tell you what I observe. I observe that the shop has been the thing you held on to when everything else fell apart. And that's real, and it matters. And I also observe that a person can love something that was a lifeline without being required to keep it exactly as it is forever. She looked at him. Growth isn't betrayal. He sat with that. Is that what you think I'm afraid of? He said. I think you're afraid that letting anything change means losing control of the narrative again, the way you lost it when Dana left. You've been very careful for 4 years to only let change happen on your terms. It was the truest thing anyone had said to him in a long time, and he felt it the way you feel something true, with the brief resistance of a man who didn't ask for the mirror, and the subsequent settling of someone who knows he needed it. Take the meeting, she said. You don't have to take the deal, just take the meeting. And you, he said. What happens to you if I have options? She looked at him directly. That depends on what your options are, and what you want them to include. I want them to include you. She held his gaze. Then we figure it out together. That's what together means. He took the meeting 2 weeks later. He drove to Columbus on a Wednesday. Danny running the shop. Sophie texting him twice on the drive with things that were specifically not about the meeting. A link to a horse-related news story. Lily would like a complaint about the library's new printer. He understood what she was doing. She was making sure he didn't go alone. Not by being there, but by being present in the way she knew how. He came back at 6. He drove directly to her house. She opened the door before he knocked, which meant she'd been watching. Well, she said. It's a good offer, he said. Full partnership, not acquisition. My name stays on the building. I stay as head of operations, 2 additional bays, and a service contract that would triple our revenue in the first year. And I told them I needed 30 days. She looked at him. That's not an answer. I know, I'm not ready to give an answer yet. He stepped inside. But I know what I want the answer to involve. Tell me. I want to talk to Danny first, because whatever I decide he deserves to know before I sign anything. He paused. And I want to talk to you, properly. Not tonight because tonight I'm still processing, but this week. Okay. And Sophie, whatever I decide about the business, I'm not going anywhere. That's not part of the calculation. You're not a variable in this. You're a constant. She stared at him. A constant, she repeated. Yeah. You're telling me I'm a mathematical constant. I'm telling you you're the fixed point. Everything else moves around it. She blinked. Something happened in her expression that moved through several stages rapidly, the almost composure, the brief loss of it, the recovery that was gentler than usual. I need you to know, she said, that I have never in my adult life been anyone's fixed point. You are now. She pressed her lips together very hard. Don't cry, he said. I'm not crying. Okay. I'm just... She stopped. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me. I know, I'm saying it now, get used to it. She laughed. The wet-edged laugh, the real one. She pressed her hand flat against his chest briefly, like she was steadying herself. Go home, she said. Feed your daughter. Sleep. We'll talk Thursday. Thursday. He went home. He made dinner. He helped with homework. He put Lily to bed. He sat on his porch in the November cold and looked at the stars and made without any drama the decision that had been assembling itself for weeks. I wasn't going to sell, but he was going to partner. Because Sophie was right. Growth wasn't betrayal. Holding something in exactly the shape it was, because you were afraid to let it change, was not love. It was fear dressed as loyalty. He'd done enough of that with his own heart. He wasn't going to do it with his work. He called Jennifer Mosley the next morning and said, I'm in. Send the partnership terms. He told Danny that afternoon. Danny, who had worked for him for 2 years and never once taken credit he didn't earn, and never once failed to hand him the right tool in the right moment, listened to the whole thing and then said, "Does this mean I get health insurance?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "It means you get health insurance." "Okay," Danny said. "Good. I've had this tooth situation." Ethan looked at him. "A tooth situation. Going on 4 months." "Danny, I was going to mention it." He laughed for a long time. The December night he took Sophie back to the drive-in was not a planned thing. That was the detail he always remembered afterward. He hadn't staged it. He'd looked up and realized they were doing a holiday double feature White Christmas, and then something newer that neither of them ended up seeing, and he'd bought 2 tickets and texted her, "Wrap up warm." "We're going somewhere." She'd texted back, "That's extremely suspicious. Do you trust me?" Annoyingly, yes. Lily was at Karen's for the night. They drove out to the east side of town. She recognized it before they turned into the lot. "The drive-in," she said. "Yeah. It's December. They have heaters, and it's not that cold yet." "It's 38 degrees, Ethan." "I brought blankets." She looked at him. He pulled into the same spot as June, middle of the lot, good angle. He reached behind the seat and produced the blankets. She took one and shook her head. "You planned this," she said. "I saw the listing and bought tickets. That's the full extent of the planning." "You bought 2 tickets." "They were cheaper in pairs." She stared at him. He grinned. "I hate you," she said, and she was smiling so wide it had taken over her whole face. "No, you don't." "No," she agreed. "I really don't." They settled in with the blankets and the heater going, and the December sky enormous above the windshield. She'd brought popcorn. Of course she had. Just one kind this time, the jalapeno, which had become the standard. Before the first movie started, she said, "Can I say something? Always. I want to say what this year has been." She held the popcorn in her lap and looked at the screen. "I moved here knowing nobody. I had a job and a guest room's worth of furniture and a plan that had already been revised twice. I was okay. I want to be clear that I was okay. But I was also going to go to that drive-in alone and eat my popcorn and drive home and tell myself it was a good evening." "I know." "And then you were on your porch. And you had the extra ticket. And you said yes." She turned to look at him. "You didn't have to say yes. You almost didn't. But you said yes. And then you showed up. You kept showing up. Even when it was complicated. Even when Dana called. Even when it would have been easier to—" "Sophie, let me finish." He waited. "You showed me," she said, "what it looks like when someone isn't ashamed of you. What it looks like when someone fights for you before you ask. What it looks like when someone tells the truth even when the truth is hard." She paused. "I'd been told in 100 small ways for most of my adult life that someone like me should be grateful for whatever she gets. Should take up less space. Should not want too much." She looked at him. "You taught me to stop believing that. Not with grand gestures. Just by showing me every day the ordinary days that I was exactly enough." He reached over and took her hand. She held on. "For the record," he said, "you did the same thing for me, every part of it." She looked at their hands. "We did good," she said. "Yeah," he said. "We really did." The movie started. They didn't talk for a while. They didn't need to. The heater hummed. The jalapeno popcorn was as always aggressively good. The December stars above the windshield were the same stars as June, just colder and brighter, the way Ohio winter strips the atmosphere down to something clear. About 20 minutes in, Sophie said quietly, "Ethan." "Yeah." "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly without worrying about what I want you to say." He turned to look at her. "Are you happy?" she said. "Not okay, not managing, happy." "I thought about Lily this morning at breakfast, asking Sophie to braid her hair, and Sophie doing it badly, and Lily correcting her with aggressive patience, and both of them laughing." He thought about the shop, about the partnership papers he'd signed last week, about Danny's tooth situation finally being addressed. He thought about Eleanor on his porch, saying good bones. He thought about Marcus at the cookout saying, "Don't mess this up." He thought about the dented trash can that was gone, and the new one that had no story yet, and how that was the point. He thought about 4 years of a quiet that was absence, and the quiet he lived in now that was presence. I thought about Sophie's hand in his in the town hall in front of Craig Ellison, and everyone who'd had opinions, and the way not a single one of those opinions had mattered at all. He thought about her saying "I love you" in his kitchen doorway, like it was simply true, because it was. "Yeah," he said. "I'm happy." She squeezed his hand. "Good. You?" She leaned her head back against the seat and looked at the screen, and he could see her profile against the movie light. Honest, unguarded, the version of her she'd been slowly allowing to exist in the world. The version that wasn't performing strength, or managing perception, or apologizing for space. "I'm happy," she said. Like the answer surprised her slightly even now. Like she was still recalibrating to what it felt like when it was real. "I'm really happy." On the screen something was happening that neither of them were tracking. It didn't matter. The movie had always been secondary. It was secondary in June, and it was secondary now, and it would probably always be secondary because that was the thing about that first night. The movie was never the point. The point was two people deciding in the dark to turn toward each other instead of away. Everything that followed was just the continuation of that first decision. Stay. Tell the truth. Keep showing up. He'd been afraid for 4 years that he wasn't enough. That the version of himself that came out of the divorce, the single father, the small-town mechanic, the man who punched his trash can instead of his wall and called it coping, that version wasn't worth someone staying for. Sophie had stayed, not because she'd fixed him, not because he'd fixed her, but because they'd both arrived imperfect and scarred and exactly themselves, and chosen to stay in the same room long enough to find out what was possible. What was possible turned out to be this: a man and a woman in a truck. In December, hand in hand, jalapeno popcorn between them, not watching the movie, no longer afraid of the quiet. Lily had said in September over cereal, "Some people you just know." She was right. She was 7 years old, and she was completely, entirely right. Ethan Brooks had spent 4 years learning how to survive. He had spent 6 months learning how to live again. And he had spent the rest of it understanding that the difference between those two things was not a dramatic moment or a grand decision. It was 1,000 small choices made in ordinary light to believe that he was worth the staying. Sophie had believed it before he did. I intended to spend a long time being grateful for that. The movie rolled on. The December night held them. And in a small town in Ohio, in a drive-in that had been there since 1957 and had survived everything the world could throw at it. Two people who had almost not found each other sat in a warm truck and held on. Not desperately, not with the white-knuckled grip of people afraid of losing, but with the easy, certain hold of people who have learned that this right here is exactly what they came for. Not perfect, not fixed, not finished, but real, completely, finally, and without apology, real. And that was more than enough. That was everything.